Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this channel. Today we are going to be reacting to someone who is on the left. Someone who, by chance, was my introduction to politics. So I'm always going to have a bit of a soft spot for Kyle Kulinski. His promotion of Bernie Sanders going into the 2016 election was something that got me really engaged in the political process, as well as simply standing for issues that could benefit the well-being of the general person, pointing to the difference in happiness levels between our country and the Scandinavian countries, and how that might serve as evidence that this country doesn't have its priorities correct, and how he places way too much emphasis on protecting corporations. I still believe all of those things to be true, but at this point, I view these issues from a bit more balanced of a perspective. I've moved away from the left, at least somewhat, as a consequence of reading Thomas Sowell and Milton Friedman and all the rest. In this one, he's actually reacting to a video. Marianne exposes Bill Maher to his face. Marianne, in this case, is Marianne Williamson, Democratic presidential candidate. Kyle's going to take a position that is pro-Marianne, and Bill is going to take his position, and I am going to butt in here with my own perspective. Let's get into it.
You know, the American people are not the problem. The sclerotic political and media systems that suppress and thwart the will of the people is the problem. But when you actually just are out there talking to people, people would ask me, what was your experience last time? And it's even more so this time, that the system, the political media industrial complex, is even more corrupt than I feared, and the people are even more wonderful than I hoped.
I don't agree.
Now, to be fair, this is something Bill Maher has always said. He's always been like, the people are stupid. Okay, I'm Bill Maher.
It's a pretty funny impersonation. Not the best, but he has some of the tone down there. To be honest, I quite enjoy Bill Maher new rule segments where he's just shitting on people, but not the most productive thing all the time.
Because we can be honest about this and say we appreciate each other for saying what we think our truth is. But I sort of understand why, as a politician, even if you didn't really believe that, you have to say that. You can't start.
No, I don't say things you have to say. I'm not running saying things.
So
I think we have different experiences, that's all.
I really like that she called him out on that. I think Marianne Williamson is less politically calculated than someone like Vivek. I probably agree more with Vivek in the grand scheme of things. But if I'm weighing this issue honestly, Vivek is in a position where he has to make more political calculations than does Marianne. Perhaps she won't make as many strides as Vivek will because she's not willing to make those political calculations.
I'm just saying, I don't think you can ever separate the people from, this government that's thwarting the will. Not in a country like this. Yes, of course, in behind the Iron Curtain, the will of the people was not what the East German government wanted. That's certainly not the case. I think our government is a reflection of the people.
You think this government is a reflection of the people? Bill, that's empirically not true. Empirically not true.
What he's about to point out is that all of the issues that the progressive left tends to focus on are supported when you go issue by issue in terms of poll numbers. Universal health care, free college, legalization of marijuana, etc., etc. A majority of people in the country tend to agree with these initiatives. Of course, just because a majority of people agree doesn't mean that these are necessarily good ideas. But it speaks to the fact that you would expect progressive candidates to get more attention.
What is it, like 70 or 80% of the American people want to raise the minimum wage? We don't get it.
The minimum wage, that's another one. Should I go into that right now? Increasing the minimum wage would have a double-edged effect. On one hand, it would force larger corporations that might be able to afford to pay their employees more to pay their employees more. On the other hand, it would have an absolutely crippling effect on small businesses. And so from a left-wing perspective, if you are interested in confronting this corporatocracy that has been solidifying itself over the last several generations, I think the worst thing that you can put in place are measures that big businesses can deal with while small businesses can't. There's this great factoid that Thomas Sowell talks about, Walter Williams tends to discuss as well, how in apartheid South Africa, the minimum wage was a policy that was supported by segregationists because they understood that that policy would have a negative influence on Black communities. Less wealthy Black businesses would not be able to continue to pay their employees, and Black employees would be waged out of employment. This is a very inconvenient truth for the left. I've never heard a single progressive address this fact. In fact, one of the things I started to realize is that many channels on the left solely go after the strawman conservative arguments without tackling the great intellectual conservative thinkers. You can go after Jesse Waters on Fox News or Sean Hannity. I've never heard Kyle do a segment about Thomas Sowell. Maybe I've heard him do one segment on Milton Friedman at one point, but he doesn't really go too far down that rabbit hole. And I think the reason why people on the left avoid the conservative intellectual titans is that they know it's a battle that's more difficult to win. It's a lot easier to go after Sean Hannity than it is to go after Thomas Sowell. Just saying.
What is it, like 60 or 70% want to raise taxes on the wealthy? We don't get it. A majority wants universal health care. We don't get it. You go down the list of the things, money out of politics, and
the point here is completely understandable. The government is totally corrupt. Absolutely. Citizens United, super PAC money, politicians are bought by corporations. I'm in full agreement with that. On an issue-by-issue basis, the Democratic majority of the electorate is not recognized. It is not represented by our politicians. People are not getting what they want in Washington. The poll numbers regarding congressional approval have been in the shitter for years and years. Now, of course, on the right and left, you focus on different elements of Congress, but the system is horrendous. You're not going to get any argument from me, Kyle. Of course, on these various policy issues, you might get some more disagreement.
And the corruption, that's like 80%. We don't get it. Gun reform. Something like 90% want to do universal background checks, and we still don't have universal background checks. We haven't gotten it. A government that is a reflection of the people would do all of those policies, because it's very clear that this is what they want. In many instances, even a majority of Republicans come together with independents and Democrats on a lot of these issues. We don't get it. So he's just factually wrong on this. But since he's doing his whole smug, like, the people suck routine, he can't help himself, and he's throwing them under the bus, even though in many instances the people are the victims of their own government's corruption. They always know they're voting for the lesser of two evils.
The reason we have the people we have, it's they didn't get there by answering a want ad.
Well,
they got there because people voted for them, and their policies and politicians, yes, tell people bullshit, but the main reason.
Yes, but Bill, it's a magician's choice. If you get a bunch of candidates that are propped up because they have a bunch of money and they represent corporate interests, you don't have many options here. And we've gotten in this situation over and over and over and over again. I mean, it's just an endless stream of political bullshit. And of course, the candidates that come along that seek to challenge mainstream orthodoxy are considered these dangerous outsider candidates without political experience. Ooh, you can't trust them because they don't have political experience. No, the media says you can't trust them because they're not bought and sold by corporations. They're not serving the military-industrial complex. All of these media companies are propped up by defense contractors. So, I mean, yeah. The left has some legitimate issues that they point to. I wish conservatives would spend more time actually validating the left-wing concerns. We're too busy. God, yeah, I'm going to go on a bit of a rant here. The right is too busy focusing on issues where they know they're going to win. They're focused on Dylan Mulvaney on a Bud Light can. Fucking A, dude. And you spend weeks talking about it. Unbelievable.
They tell them bullshit because if they tell them the truth, they'll throw them out of the race.
Okay, so what you need is somebody who doesn't mind being thrown out of the race. Somebody's got to tell the truth. And when you just said you think I let the people off the hook too much, in the way I see it, you let the government off the hook too much. Because if you look at poll after poll, for instance, the majority of Americans, both Democrats and Republicans, want universal health care. If you look at the polls, the majority of Americans, including Democrats and Republicans, want tuition-free college and tech school. If you look at the polls, the majority
Of course they want free things. I want ice cream, too.
those things
I'm laughing at Bill getting jumpy with his phone dinging in the background there. That was entertaining to watch. Bill's sardonic statement of course they want free things, I want free ice cream. Not much of an argument, but I have some disagreements
Bill,
here with
do
Kyle.
you really think it's an apt comparison to say, here are the basic necessities of life that every other developed country can deliver, and we haven't yet, versus ice cream? We want free ice cream, free toys, a free PlayStation 5. I'm Bill Maher, okay? I think there's a distinction. This reminds me of when Ben Shapiro went after Bernie Sanders, when Bernie said something similar, and he was like, well, I want a free couch. I want a free designer couch. people want a free designer couch. When Bernie was like, people don't even have enough money to go to the doctor. He's like, well, I don't have enough money to get that really nice designer luxury couch. The fact that you think this is a compelling point says so much about you.
What easier statement could you ever make in politics than people want? Yeah, they want. That's not where the rubber meets the road. Yes, they want free healthcare. What are they willing to sacrifice for it? Are they willing to, why don't we have good healthcare in this country? It's because they never really learned to tame the corporations.
But that's her point. And that's my point. Is that if you represent the will of the people, you take on the corporations, but they're not doing that because the corporations have bought the politicians.
Even if all of what you're saying, Kyle, is true, and I agree that a good portion of it is true, the politicians are totally corrupt, that the pharmaceutical industry has people by the balls. I'm totally with you on that. But actually implementing a healthcare system that works for this many people, it's different than other countries. It is harder to make a healthcare system in a country with 330 million plus people function than a healthcare system with 20 million people. But let's talk about college a little bit, because one of Kyle's main ideas is that we should make college free for everyone. Free college means it's being subsidized. It's being subsidized by taxpayers. In Kyle's perspective, it's being subsidized by wealthy people who are paying more in taxes. The question is, will free college for everybody equal the playing field to a level where that equal opportunity will benefit people's employability? That's the question. What I think that progressives miss on this issue is that if we send everybody to college, we've merely created a new floor where now the new issue is distinguishing yourself to employers. We already have the situation where in order to work at a fucking Starbucks, you need a bachelor's degree. What the hell is that? We want to give people education. We want to expand access to education. But at this point, the more and more people you send through these institutions, you're not solving the problem of differentiation. There's this great book called The Case Against Education by Brian Kaplan. It talks about how there are advantages to getting university degrees in terms of employability and income throughout one's professional career. You make significantly more with a bachelor's degree than if you don't have a bachelor's degree. However, whether that difference in income is actually because of what is being taught at college is highly debatable. And as Kaplan points out, the vast majority of this income boost that is provided to those who achieve their bachelor's degrees is due to what Kaplan calls a sheepskin effect. It's that little period from your penultimate semester to just getting through your final semester that makes all the difference in terms of that pay bump. What does that imply? That the employers don't really care about what is being taught at university. They care about one's conscientiousness to fully complete university. At the end of the day, the university degree is just a completely useless hurdle that we spend so much time and resources investing in, that it just causes another layer of bullshit for students to get through before they enter the job market. We would be much better off if we opened up alternative educational pathways where people could access equal degrees of employability, regardless of whether they'd gone to one pathway or the other. That's what needs to take place. But the universities have no incentive for that. They have such a monopoly on employability at this point. And meanwhile, their administrators are just raking it in. And people are racking up student debt. The average college student has tens of thousands of dollars of student debt. Yeah, we could erase all of that student debt by creating free college, but yeah, the money is going to be redistributed on taxpayers. It's not a particularly efficient mechanism. Maybe it would be better than what we have now. Maybe it won't. I can easily envision a time where college will be even more expensive, and then it won't mean anything. It'll be paid for by taxpayers, and then you have to go to grad school. That's where you start to differentiate yourself. Oh, and then go to PhD. Now you need a PhD. Academia isn't for everyone, folks. Unbelievable.
Now you don't have to. So there is no sacrifice. All we're talking about here is reallocating where our money goes. We spend trillions of dollars on the military-industrial complex endlessly. We give giant corporate subsidies out. How about we don't do that, but what we do is provide the basics for the people? That's the point.
Why don't we have...
A strong defense is important. Don't get me wrong. There are some people on the left who think we should just eradicate all of the defense spending. I think that's a pretty bad idea. Already, I heard this stat the other day. Over 70% of young men in this country are physically ill-equipped to be enlisted for military service. There's something so dark about this. In terms of the money that we allocate toward the military, I think the US goes around playing too much global police. Yeah, we want to help other countries. It's really hard to intervene effectively, especially when you don't know very much about the culture. And I can totally see how the US in all of these different interventions thought like, oh, we're going to go in there, we're going to bring peace to the region because we're promoting such virtuous values. And then you go in and realize, well, they don't really want us here. And well, I guess we're here. I think this just happens over and over again. I know, really, really stellar geopolitical knowledge here. I mean, you can really tell I've studied this stuff intensely. Mainly I'm just applying my own knowledge of psychological interventions, how difficult it is to actually provide effective treatment for an individual, and thinking, wow, if it's really hard to effectively treat an individual, it must be really difficult to go in there and cause positive change in an entire destabilized quagmire. The road to hell is paved with good intentions.
But we have good healthcare in this country. It's because they never really learned to tame the corporations.
Exactly, my point.
Okay, but who lets that happen?
The government,
people.
the legislators who would...
The people, Bill, are busy trying to pay the bills and keep the lights on and take care of their kids and keep the train on the tracks for their life. That's what the people are busy doing. People things. Normal things. Is it incumbent upon them? I don't think so. The problem is it should have never been this corrupt in the first place. We should have never allowed big money into politics. But now we have this cockamamie situation where the Supreme Court says money equals speech, and so now billionaires...
Okay, here's another issue that I have with left-wingers. Oh, we're gonna get into it. Everyone thinks that it's the Supreme Court's responsibility to reinterpret the law. I have huge issues with this. Not the Supreme Court's job. The Supreme Court is supposed to uphold what's in the Constitution. There's a lot of people on the left who thinks this is all bullshit, that the divisions of the Supreme Court that seem to fully align with political boundaries are in place so that conservatively appointed judges are upholding the conservative positions and the liberally appointed judges are holding up the liberal positions. This is not how the law is supposed to work. I'm not a constitutional scholar. I'm not a legal scholar. But I have actually taken a look at that Citizens United case, and it's not as simple as you might think. I know we don't want money to be in politics. We don't want politicians to be bought and sold. But that's not the Supreme Court's role. Their role is to uphold the Constitution and to adhere to the Constitution. Their role is not moral arbiter, regardless of whether we want our society to look a certain way. That being said, I can hear the response right now. There are people on the Supreme Court, like Clarence Thomas, who I think are completely corrupt. Corrupt! You should not be on the Supreme Court if your wife is a right-wing activist. I think that's a conflict of interest that cannot be held separate from the job description. Your wife's a right-wing activist? That's fine. You can no longer be on the Supreme Court. I think it's absurd that Clarence Thomas is on the Supreme Court. Just saying. And I'm an originalist, by the way. Yeah, how many times have you heard that? A liberal originalist. Yeah, go put that one down. I'm a liberal. I want things to change. But you gotta change things carefully. But yeah, get Clarence Thomas off the Supreme Court. Just ridiculous. So corrupt.
Billionaires and corporations can buy our entire political process, and you're blaming the victims of that.
No, oh, Bill, come on.
Somebody sends Ted Cruz to Washington.
Well, that's Texas, my home state, so I can say it. So,
well,
yes, but the obfuscation, Bill, and the suppression and the thwarting, and I know that. I'm running for office.
Yes,
I'm in the belly of that beast right now, and I know how they manipulate narratives. Absolutely, the left as well. You know, it seems to me that if you have any two Americans, you were talking about the indoctrination before. If you talk about any two Americans just having a conversation, we tend to kind of get down and get real and get authentic as much.
Like us now.
Yeah, you and I would do that. And
We're
do
doing
that.
it.
Right. Okay, but hold on. And that's one of the values of your programming always for years now. But hold on a moment. My point is that when it comes to our collective public political dialogue, we have been trained to go stupid. We've been trained to do exactly what you said. When it comes to our public conversation, we're indoctrinated and we think in terms of slogans. And we think, and you see it on the left as well as the right. You see it right now with the Democratic Party. This codependent relationship with the DNC. They say Biden is the one. Can we have some independent thought here?
Right.
Can we have maybe some exposure to other candidates? But I think that what I find in my experience is that people hear that and are kind of yearning for a more meaningful public conversation. But there's a lot of obstruction to it. And the media chops the wood and carries the water for the political elite. The mainstream media. Absolutely.
All enabled by
Holy smokes, do they ever. And look, new media's here. We're here to throw a wrench in this whole equation. We'll be able to conduct interviews that are far more honest than the mainstream media ever will. Are we going to fall victim to sensationalist tactics and yellow journalism? Yeah, those tendencies are already appearing. But so far, you get people like CoffeeZilla? Like, holy smokes, CoffeeZilla, in my mind, one of the best journalists in the country. He got SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried, to admit some pretty damning stuff on camera.
When the collapse sort of completed, that effectively meant that there was, if you wanted to put it this way, like fungibility created during those withdrawals between assets for people who had and had not been using.
But that means that there is no separation of funds. If there's fungibility between two different buckets of there are no buckets. It's just one bucket. Everyone's taking out of the bucket, which means substantially anyone who had your terms of service with digital assets wasn't actually subject to that terms of service. They were subject to the same terms of service of your margin trading, right? Which is your more risky products.
I think we should appreciate that as a symbol of how far new media has come. Good stuff. Good stuff.
The people.
She goes on this brilliant rant, deconstructing his point. And he's like, anyway, have I said the people are stupid? Okay. Oh my God, he's so frustrating. He's so frustrating. All right, we're not done. This continues.
The status quo is unsustainable. Things are going to break one way or the other. They're either going to break in the direction of greater democracy and justice, or they are going to break in the direction of dystopia and authoritarianism. That's why we cannot put against Donald Trump or any of those guys in 2024 someone who does not deliver more for the people. Franklin Roosevelt said that we wouldn't have to worry about a fascist takeover as long as democracy delivered on its promises. Democracy is not delivering on its promises, Bill, and you can't expect people to be okay with that.
It's not delivering on its promises to all the people.
All the people, 20% of Americans live, if you're in the top.
It's not delivering on its promises to a majority of the people. If it's not delivering on its promises to a majority, then the democracy is not functioning. Granted, I mean, we're using democracy so loosely here. I know it always gets brought up. We're a constitutional republic. We elect representatives. We're not supposed to function fully as a democracy. The representatives are supposed to be more intelligent and more informed about the issues than the Democratic constituents. The problem is that if they are going to represent the population, not just kowtow to them, politicians can do that too, but actually represent honestly and earnestly what the public wants, they need to be forthright about what they're doing. And politicians are so sleazy and manipulative. I showed that video of Mitch McConnell getting up in front of the press conference and basically had a stroke on camera, which is not something to laugh about. But the fact that he came back and said, oh yeah, no, everything is fine.
Have you seen a doctor? Are you going to see
Any idea what happened?
Huh?
Any idea what happened?
I'm fine.
Bullshit, everything is fine. You guys are so dishonest in Washington. And no wonder society's going to shit. Because our leaders lie, and they lie, and they lie, and they fucking lie. And they don't have any integrity. And it's infuriating. Oh, on both the left and the right, they all lie. Being honest is tough. I am not going to make it seem like, oh, I've never told a lie before. We're constantly editing ourselves and filtering ourselves, and the whole idea of a social filter is seen as a good thing, generally. But sometimes there are occasions where the filter needs to be dropped, the mask needs to be taken off, and the truth needs to be revealed.
20% of the American economy are doing pretty well. 20% are like on an island surrounded by a vast sea of economic despair. 70% of Americans experience chronic economic anxiety. 1 in 4 Americans live...
Not 70%. That's ridiculous.
That's the latest report.
This is what happened when Crystal was...
70%? Bill, yeah, no, 70%. I mean, there was that poll about 80% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. If that number has decreased at this point, it's only 70% that have economic anxiety, or maybe economic anxiety and people living paycheck to paycheck are slightly different metrics. Yeah, that's fair. That's a lot of people. That's a majority of people in this supposedly prosperous nation where we have all this wealth. How has the wealth become so consolidated? Are we materially richer than we were in past generations? In many ways, yes. But that doesn't mean that we are lifting everyone up.
Last on Bill Maher's show, and she brought up that the stock market tanked and the government came in and bailed them out.
And we do this with every market crash. Wall Street always gets their little subsidies. It's corporate socialism across the board. There are issues where we can build political coalitions, where right and left will agree on the initiative. It's not as if conservatives like bailing out big banks. That's not a conservative thing.
And Crystal's point was the government rushes in, to save the big banks and to save the stock market, but there is no rushing in to save the 500,000 Americans who go...
Just horrible. Horrible, terrible, terrible, terrible. Steve, this is terrible.
That's terrible.
Still can't fucking solve that problem. They can't get it from either end. I don't understand that, because it's not like they don't take a great deal of taxes. What they do with it is a lot of wasted graft.
That is correct.
I mean, look what the COVID money.
Okay, there is this too. I mean, I think there's a statistic. The average American spends $18,000 a year on non-essential items. That's probably not that great. If everyone in society was a minimalist, yeah, people would be doing better. But then again, what are all of the corporate incentives? They want consumerism. Consumerism, consumerism, consumerism across the board. If you're not a consumer, you're not buying into our wonderful American culture. So they want you to consume, and they advertise to you nonstop. So yeah, we could all be minimalists. That would definitely function better for people saving money. But that would sort of ruin the whole point of the economy that's been incentivized.
At least half of that COVID money, and we're talking in the trillions, was
didn't
just
even go
flat
to the
out
people who needed it.
stolen.
They could have just given $60 to every person. It would have done more for people and to stimulate
So yes,
the
there
economy.
is this underclass in this country. I agree. They're like 40% of the country, I think.
Could not absorb
like $1,000
$400
or something like that.
unexpected
Yes.
expense. So think of the anxiety.
A lot of people don't have money, but some of them have at least family members around them that can support them. Quite a few people don't have any money and they don't have any support. Some don't even have families. Some of them are kicked out of their house due to a difference in identity. That takes place as well.
Medicare for all.
Well,
That's what
Obamacare is getting very close to Medicare for all.
He said Obamacare is getting very close to Medicare for all. Bill, that's so absurd.
Okay, I don't know anything
That's so
about healthcare.
absurd. Obamacare mandates
I know
people
nothing.
to pay a private parasitic mafia.
Oh, okay, I do know this about healthcare though. That Obamacare was inspired by Romneycare, Mitt Romney, which was a spin-off of Republican proposed healthcare system by Richard Nixon. I think that's the idea. This the individual mandate. As far as a left-wing policy, Obamacare not exactly a left-wing policy. But who knows? A lot of people don't know the difference between the Affordable Care Act and Obamacare.
And he's acting like, well, I mean, Obamacare is pretty much Medicare. Oh my God, Bill. Oh, what the hell happened to you, man? See, this is what happens when he has online brainworms. He's the only voter in the country who went from Bernie Sanders in 2016 to Amy Klobuchar in 2020. And you can see this is...
Okay, not many people went from Bernie Sanders to Amy Klobuchar. But I am going for Bernie Sanders to Vivek. So that is quite a shift. You might accuse me of having brainworms, Kyle. I don't think that I have brainworms. The left is very good at pointing to a lot of problems. And I wish the right would actually spend more time addressing the problems to which the left alludes. Because we'd actually get into some pretty good conversations about the corporatocracy. We get in some good conversations about military spending.
85 million Americans who are underinsured or uninsured. And you have to be really like kind of buffered emotionally if you think 85 million people does not matter.
No, I'm not the straw man who thinks 85 million.
No, I'm not
people.
saying that you are,
Okay.
but I'm just saying when people say, oh, well, that doesn't matter.
No, but I'm also saying that when you
Okay, Marianne, who says the 85 million people don't matter? Is that a conservative talking point? Can't believe that anybody would think that 85 million people don't matter. The issues that we have to bridge here are not about whether 85 million people do matter or don't matter. And if you're on the left, you care about those 85 million people. If you're on the right, you don't. The question is, how do you implement a system that best helps as many people as possible?
ride around, you just see a country that does not look like it's falling apart.
Bill, where are you spending your time, Bill?
Yeah, it really does depend on where you're spending your time. Sometimes I think like that when I'm going through Berkeley, California. Well, actually, in Berkeley, California, there is a large homeless population. So some things aren't so great there, but certain sections of Berkeley, California, beautiful. These private neighborhoods, pristine. They have bike lanes and it's quiet. Like, this is what the liberals do. They impose policies that are really, really nice for a minority of the community. Just don't focus on the homeless people there. Don't pay attention. Oh, the high rent prices? No. Look at our beautiful communities with bike lanes. Oh man, I'm so mean. You know, you need to go into parts of the country that are struggling to see this. I'm guessing that Bill Maher is not going to those regions. They're not exactly vacation destinations.
Bill, or I'm guessing you're in like very wealthy parts of LA, right? And when you go to like a 4-star hotel. What's the top, 4 or 5? I don't know. He goes to like a top level hotel when he goes on the road and does his his stand-up routine. Like, it's the circles you run in, dude. It like you are totally disconnected from the reality of working people.
It matters what I read and what people tell me. It also matters that I just live in this world, and I travel a lot, and I'm out in the city a lot, and a lot of people are just living their best lives.
Oh my God. This is my anecdotal experience overrides the empirical data.
They're not all fucking rich. It's not all the top 20%. For all its horrible problems, this country still somehow, how we got through the pandemic and didn't go broke, I don't know. I mean, we probably will in the future. Maybe it's the inflation is part of that issue. But,
well, the country's balance sheet isn't looking too good, and it hasn't looked too good for a while. $30 trillion of debt is not going to be reversed anytime soon, plus a 1 point whatever trillion dollar deficit. God. You know, these people in government really know how to run a viable economic operation. Let me tell you, beautiful, just unbelievable.
You're surrounded by like rich comedians and rich actors and, you know, wealthy hanger-ons, and you're like going to the wealthy areas, and he's like, bro, everything looks great.
I was speaking to teenagers on Skid Row. Do you know how many people are homeless in Los Angeles County on any given night? 70.
if you go to Skid Row, you're going to, okay.
That's my point.
He's laughing at it. She's like, well, what about Skid Row? He's like, well, of course, Skid Row. But why are you acting like that doesn't count, Bill? Why is that like, well, that's just what happens there? Because it's, to some extent, he's gotten comfortable with having this whole other America where people are living like that. And he just thinks that's just the natural order of the world.
But this is the thing. It is natural. Every person, every normal person who has the economic means of doing so will remove themselves from the communities that are struggling. You know, the left likes to focus on issues of racism and sexism and homophobia. The biggest pervading issue in the United States of America that divides people is class. Okay, you can have one of the most open, like, oh, we should love all people. Let's invite everybody into our community. And then you ask that same person to go over there and hug a homeless person. And they'll be like, ooh, I don't want to do that. That's the reality, folks. They want to help, but they aren't willing to get their hands dirty. And to be honest, sometimes I'm terrified that that represents me as well. Like, for now, I'm making YouTube videos because if I don't have influence to work with here, there's not much to be done. Let me tell you, we're not going to be making YouTube videos forever. Or maybe we will, but we're not going to be sitting in a studio. The plan is to get out there and make things happen. But then you get into all these issues of, oh, you don't want to like carry a camera around and document the homelessness and document how you're helping the homeless because that's minimizing your charity. And I understand that perspective. The most virtuous acts are done in private. A few more minutes here.
This is the implication here. And it's like, no, Bill, it most certainly is not the natural order of the world.
So you drive around, but where do you drive around?
Okay.
You don't drive too many miles.
In all fairness, though, Kyle, the natural order of the world throughout human history has been poverty. You can go back to feudal periods. You had kings and royalty, and then you had a bunch of peasants, a bunch of serfs. You can go back to other periods where the war and the rituals were a little bit more gruesome. We can complain about the issues that exist right now, certainly with reference to the 1980s or the 1970s or the 1950s. We can talk about how certain elements of society have changed for the worse, but you still have to put it in perspective with not just the rest of the world. Okay, I've spent time in Bangladesh, spending time as a traveler on an island in Thailand. Life's a lot different there. The default state of humanity is poverty, Kyle. That's the default. Don't lose sight of that.
Too many miles.
Of course, why would I go to Skid Row?
That's kind of my point. So you don't really, you say, I don't see anybody going through that.
No,
That's
I
right,
don't.
you're not driving
Right.
there.
And most
They're
people
more than
don't.
an underclass.
Yes.
There's this invisibilized
Yes.
field of suffering
it's
out
not
there.
more than an underclass. It's an underclass. It's a too large underclass that this country, that it's a scandal that we certainly can't seem to address it.
No. It's not that
But-
we can't address it. It's that in order to address it, you have to challenge the corporate bottom line. You either can allow short-term profits for huge corporate entities, insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, big agricultural companies, chemical companies, big.
Or you have to convince people in this society, the wealthy in this society, to invest their resources in something with ethical consideration, let's say. And I believe there's people out there with a lot of money who want to put their money to good use. They don't want to give it to the government because they think the government will waste it. Why would you want to give it to this shitty government? Their bottom line is negative. They don't know how to balance a budget. They don't know how to operate an effective welfare program. That's where so much money goes. Oh, but there are private citizens out there who also have a lot of money, who want their money to be put to good use. They're not just greedy individuals that want the underlings to suffer. Maybe some are. I have faith in humanity that that is not the majority of wealthy people. They just need to be given a reason to give, and they need to be given a channel through which to give.
Food companies, gun manufacturers, big oil and defense contractors. To be this corporate.
She's dropping knowledge on Bill Maher that he hasn't heard since like 2015. I mean, she's absolutely freaking it.
Is bought and sold by that corporate aristocracy.
Right. But government, I mean, from both sides, just like we were just saying, a lot of that money was Biden money that got stolen. They passed out COVID money. Okay, so whether it's Republicans or Democrats, it seems like they both waste a lot of money, take a lot of money they shouldn't have. And corporations obviously live like fat cats too.
Right.
And corporations very often don't pay the taxes that they should.
Yes, very often, Bill.
Yes, and they should not be able to park all that money overseas. It's a traitorous thing to do.
I agree.
But what's the answer? Is to take that.
What's the answer?
I'm sympathetic to the idea that we take that money that you're parking in the Bahamas and not paying taxes on, and we give it to the government to fix these problems. But then I don't really trust the government to fix my problems because.
Oh my God! Again, he got conservative pilled at some point. Yeah, I don't trust the government to solve our problems. Well, look, earlier you brought up Social Security. It is a phenomenally successful and popular program because of the.
For now, but falling apart. Anyway, we're pretty much at the end of this video. I've done enough ranting for today. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you appreciated this left-wing perspective. If you have any disagreements, please feel free to share those in the comment section. I'm happy to continue this conversation in the comments with individual people. I'm guessing people have noticed I do tend to provide pretty lengthy responses to those who ask questions and who provide pushback. I appreciate that pushback, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.